Tal.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm well. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
It's fun, this whole Zoom thing, like checking out everyone's background. What are you sitting in front of? Some artwork I see.
That's right.
Good. I don't want to be redundant, so I'll introduce myself maybe if we wait and see if a few more people come on from Unison, just to put that out there for a second, so you're not like wondering who is this guy.
Rob, you're the events manager, right?
Yeah, I'm here to observe, make a few announcements, but
Oh,
really,
good.
it's
Oh,
your thing.
great. So you'll kick us off.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
Michael,
perfect.
Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Oh, on the hammock. Very nice,
That's
Sarah.
nice.
For sure.
So it's 4:01.
Time for fun.
That's right. And there's nobody in the waiting room currently. Maybe we can wait until 4:03 to start.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. I'm very happy.
Good. Look at this. Awesome.
We can get started, Rob. Might
Okay.
as well. And great. Yeah, we can get started.
Okay.
You'll say a few words, then I'll say a few words and introduce the artists, and then the artists will.
Yeah, that's fine. So, hi everybody. This is the guy waving his arms up here. I'm Rob Leitner. I'm the director of events at Unison. For those who know me, I'm typically doing music and spoken word and theater. I'm excited about this sculpture exhibit that's coming up and what all the artists are doing, and Tal commandeering this, and it's really been very special and exciting, even considering the circumstances. So thank you all for joining us in this incredibly unique moment in all our lives and in time. But the arts continue and thrive, and behind the scenes, much is still going on. At Unison, it's no different. We are conducting a series of online workshops that are very exciting, both for adults and children. And I am scheduling and working very hard with musicians to provide recordings that they are either donating or we're sharing as a fundraiser with them to continue to bring music into your living rooms and hammock porches and everywhere that you're available to go online. So don't forget to go to unisonarts.org to continue to see the events that we offer and take advantage of this strangely connected world and medium that we're using. We really appreciate that you're here now and continuing to support Unison and all the arts and all the artists. So this event is no different. We encourage, of course, that if you can make a donation, that you reach into your pocket and give anything from 0 to infinity to Unison Arts. And just thank you very much. I look forward to hugging all of you in the future, but I'm hugging you virtually. And with that, enough said, and I will allow Tal to take it away, and I'll put my mute on. And thank you again. Appreciate you all. And stay safe. And they say, namaste away. Go ahead, Tal. Thank you.
I had muted myself. Hi, everybody. So first, thank you so much, Rob, for introducing this. And I want to actually just start off with a big thank you to Unison Arts for hosting this today, and in general for supporting Owning Earth, which is the show I'll be discussing today. The pandemic has changed lots of things, obviously, and like all of us, arts organizations are only beginning to learn how to respond. arts organizations in the US are in the difficult position of being both highly vulnerable to the economic impacts of recessions, which are, which, is in process. But they also play crucial roles in building overall resilience and supporting economic recovery. So in recent weeks, all arts organizations have had to make substantial changes to programming in order to adapt and to continue to serve their communities. Rob, Alex Bear, Ali, Alexis, and the team at Unison has done a really amazing job of quickly creating new online programs. And I really urge you all to check out unisonarts.org for upcoming events. They've been fantastic. So now that many of us are staying at home to prevent further spread of the virus, we're being inundated with online content. And I just want to also tell you that I'm very grateful that you chose to spend an hour with us on this beautiful sunny day in this particular online space. As a point of a technical order, I'm the one right now who is also managing the waiting room and a bunch of other things. So I'm going to be introducing, but I'm also going to be admitting people as the technical host of this. So hopefully that's not going to be too much of a hassle. I'm sure that most of you have spent time on Zoom lately, but the way that this particular event is going to go down, we have 4 panelists. They're going to each give 7-minute presentations. When they're done, we're going to have an opportunity for a Q&A. That Q&A is going to be managed by raising your hand on Zoom, which basically means you go to your participants tab on the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can click on that and you can press raise hand. And then I will be calling you and unmuting you, and you'll be able to ask your question through voice. There's also a chat option at the bottom here, and I encourage you to use that too at some point or another if you have something that simply can't wait. So I'd also like to say a few words of thanks before we begin to the Sculpture Committee at Unison Arts, which includes Michael Asbill, Eliza Evans, Matthew Friday, Karali Petzley, and Sarah Warren, who have been extremely supportive throughout this entire process. Without their efforts, this show would not be possible, the Owning Earth show, which I'll be talking about in a second. And finally, also, I want to say a note of thanks to Erin Antonak, who is brilliant and the assistant curator of Owning Earth. She's been really instrumental in helping to frame this show, and Erin is also one of the artists in the show, and she'll be speaking today. I look forward to her presentation and also to the 3 other presentations that we have today. And I'll introduce them all in a moment. I want to also mention that just by way of introduction to the framing for this show, our current pandemic has made it clear that human mastery over our environment is by no means complete. The case for rethinking our place on Earth, people, is as urgent as ever. And that's what Owning Earth seeks to do. I'm Tal Beery. I'm the curator of Owning Earth. It's an ambitious 2-year outdoor exhibition at the Sculpture Garden, in the Sculpture Garden at Unison Arts. The goal is to bring critical attention to an emerging movement of creative practitioners who are undertaking outdoor installations and land-based projects that problematize notions of control, that confront systems of domination, and hopefully prepare the soil for futures guided by mutuality and reverence. The exhibition will be accompanied by a series of public events and workshops that will be developed by the artists in partnership with numerous Hudson Valley-based organizations aiming to bolster a just and regenerative bioregion. So if these issues are important to you, I'll be sharing a donation link in the chat right now. Please do make a contribution to Unison to support this show. And there are other ways to support the show with non-monetary support, if it's possible for you, including volunteering with, by helping us install work. And one second. I'm just posting this in the chat. And artists are also looking for materials So if that's the kind of thing that you're able to assist with, I've included the Owning Earth email in the chat as well, and that's another way to help out. This is going to be, putting on this show at this point is going to be a community effort. We've got a group of about 21 artists, each of whom is going to be participating in a series of panel discussions that will occur every 2 weeks on Sundays at 4 p.m. This particular panel, the theme is Impossible Futures. On May 17th, we will have a panel. The theme will be Material Worlds. The artists speaking will be Alex Young and Matthew Friday, Colin Lyons, Brooke Singer, and Robert C. Beck. On May 31st, we'll have on Visibility and Restoration, and that'll be Maureen Connor, and Eugenia Manuelian, Jackie Summel, and Jean-Marc Superville-Sovac. The other themes will be Art for Non-Humans, On Precarity, and On Roots and Rooting. So, without further ado, we are joined today by 4 artists whose proposals for Owning Earth challenge existing paradigms and open new realms of possibility. So the theme is Impossible Futures, and our artists are Christy Gast, Erin Antonak, Sariah Park, and Emilie Houssart. Emilie, I said your name right? Just give me a heads. Okay, great. So Erin Antonak is a sculptor, a milliner, and a Wolf Clan member of the Oneida Indian Nation of New York. Her artwork fuses traditional Iroquois sensibilities and craft techniques with contemporary materials and concepts. Emilie Houssart explores absurd symptoms of human disconnection from the environment through painting, printmaking, sculpture, and installation. Her work collides the organic with the mechanical, delicacy with violence, and naturally interdependent or chance systems with geometric constraints, posing questions about types of intelligence. And she's made a really wonderful potato cube that I urge everybody to check out on her website. I will be posting their websites right now in the chat on the Zoom. And so if you want to look into them more, you'll be able to do that. Sariah Park is an interdisciplinary artist with over 15 years of experience in fiber, print, and fashion design. Sariah's current research is focused on the development of sustainable printing methods for textiles and fine art practices. And Christy Gast is an artist whose work across media stems from extensive research and site visits to places she thinks of as contested landscapes. She's interested in places where there's evidence of conflict in human desires, which she traces, translates, or mirrors through her art practice. Her work has been exhibited at MoMA PS1, MoMA PS1 Contemporary Arts Center, Performa, Artist Space, the Harris Lieberman Gallery, and Regina Rex in New York. Regina Rex, the Paris Art Museum of Miami, Bass Museum of Art, De La Cruz Collection. Wow, she's been everywhere. She's received grants and awards from the Art Matters Foundation, Funding Arts Network, South Florida Cultural Consortium, Tiger Tail, and the Jones Sovereign Sculpture Award from Columbia University. Christy will be our first speaker, and I'm going to share my screen to show her. I'm going to share my screen here. One moment, please. Okay. Does everybody see? Oh, wait a second. Share. Okay, you should see that, right? Slide.
Oh.
And how do I do slideshow? Show like a
View.
view. Okay, present.
There you go.
All right. We on?
Try.
Oh wait.
You
My
wanna-
apologies.
That's okay.
It looks like, okay, hold on one second. I'm sorry. I am struggling.
All the way at the bottom of you get to full screen.
Okay, one moment, please. Okay, let me just try it like this. Everybody see that?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
Nice work. Oops, now we see everything. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Tal, for organizing this and for the nice introduction. Well, first I want to start off by addressing the question of impossible futures. And I think right now we're living in what a few months ago would have been considered an impossible future. We're living in a world where a microorganism, I guess, I'm not sure, that maybe or maybe not is alive, has caused the value of oil to drop below zero, and has basically caused the factory farming system to be massively disrupted and possibly cease functioning. And those are futures that maybe we might have dreamed of living in that are now coming to pass. So it's definitely an interesting time. I'm starting off with the artist rendering that I sent in to Tal for the suggestion of a sculpture that I would like to make at Unison, which is called Tree Sitting, and it's a sculpture that consists of an interconnected set of arborist knots made of stuffed denim, jeans legs, so recycled denim jeans legs, and it will be made sort of in the tree and with the tree. And so this rendering is possibly an impossible future. It's a rendering based on something that was originally much smaller, which is the next slide. So the next slide shows two recent sculptures. One is called Blake's Hitch. It's on the right, or on the left, and the other is Alpine Butterfly Loop, and they're both named after arborists' knots. And they're part of an ongoing series of sculptures and actions that propose poetic and tensile entanglements between human bodies and trees, with textiles as the intermediary. So behind this work, there's a desire to imagine and to queer interspecies intimacy. I've taken a tree climbing course at Cornell University and studied the tensile properties of arborists, ropes, and knots. I've planted an art materials arboretum at my home, and I've begun a series of sculptures enmeshing tree and human limbs, and developed a workshop that's part of this body of work with my collaborator Paloma Barra-Bordas, which is called Arbor Ardor, wherein participants court the tree of their choice and are guided into intimate contact with rope vines. The next image is the workroom at the Swale House in Governor's Island, where last summer I brought my mobile tinctorium, which is sort of a mobile workshop for textile dyes, for extracting color from plants. And I specifically worked with the plant goldenrod, which is a native plant in the aster family. And this process includes transferring color from plants to fibers, foraging, dyeing, and felting, sculptural installations, and exploratory, poetic, performative, and collaborative actions. So while I was at this workroom residency at the Swale House, I hosted a series of events, and I worked on site throughout the summer. The next slide shows, it's a detail of one of the sculptures, which is made of felted wool. And in this case, the colors came from goldenrod and walnuts. The next slide is an image of part of the installation, which is several dye vats that are solar brewing, all with the same dye stuff, which is goldenrod. So the intention of this project is, rather than to depict a landscape, was to allow the forest or the plants in the landscape to sort of co-author or determine the palette, and then the aesthetics in part of the work. The next slide shows two of the workshops that that I held. On the left is one called Felting Feeling, during which we, well, it's about exploring the wet felting process. It's a tactile process in which the animal fibers have to be shocked, massaged, submerged in hot and cold water repeatedly, and dye. The dyed wool was sort of shocked and bound into a subtle spectrum, and along the way, we held a sort of rhythmic discussion about these ideas. What is shocking? What is feeling? What is visibility? The next slide is an image of the process of climbing a tree with the correct equipment, which is what I studied in Ithaca at Cornell University. And it was, if you go to the next slide, it was sort of felt like a process of drawing in space. The ropes take a line for a walk. The body sort of moves in unpredictable ways through space in and with these trees. Next slide is an image from this massive beauty that we were learning to climb in. And then following that, you can go, yes. So next slide is a still from the workshop called Arbor Ardor, which I offer with my collaborator, Paloma Barjo Bordas. So Arbor Ardor proposes a new interspecies courting ritual. Trees and shrubs, woody or willowy, are known for gradual growth and support systems that are hidden from view, and the participants were invited to court the plant of their choice with the help of us as intermediaries. And should both the plant and the participant consent, they were guided into contact together with rope vines. So it was a sort of weaving where the human and the tree and the rope were found together. So you can sort of quickly go through the next few slides just to see what that looks like and feels like. Maybe you can get an idea of what it felt like. Next one. And that concludes my presentation. So I think you can make the connection. Thank you, Tal.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you, Christy. And my apologies in the beginning for the technical difficulty.
Totally fine, no worries.
All right, lovely. So let me just, okay, great. So our next speaker is Erin Antonak, or Erin Lee Antonak, who, as I mentioned, is a sculptor and a milliner and a Wolf Clan member of the United Indian Nation of New York. She's a graduate of Bard College and studied at Lacoste School of the Arts, France, and at Vermont Studio Center. She's currently the artist in residence at the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art in New Paltz, New York, and serves as a Yale University Morse College Fellow. Erin has worked in various museums and art galleries, developing, designing, and building exhibitions for 20 years. She's also organized and curated shows in Europe, Asia, and North America. Her artwork fuses traditional Iroquois sensibilities and craft techniques with contemporary materials and concepts. Erin is also the assistant curator of Owning Earth. I added that to the end of your bio, Erin. That's going to be there forever.
I thought I put that in the new one I sent, but you know.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well,
there's a pandemic. You know, you can excuse me.
Right. Okay. Okay. Great. Take it away, Erin.
Hi. As Tal said, I'm Erin Lee Antonak. I was raised by my mother's family, I'm proof that my mother is not full-blooded Iroquois. Because I came out a little lighter than my siblings. So I grew up in a family of artists, sculptors, traditional woodworkers. My family made replicas for museums, and we were known for our traditional materials and our traditional techniques being really true historically. So let me share my slides. Let's see, give me a second to share this. Okay, is that working? Yeah, okay. Okay, well, the crux of my work is in contemplating and investigating things we can learn from our ancestors about how to live better, happier, healthier, more balanced lives. So I'm looking at Iroquois craft, ceremonies, stories, homemaking, food cultivation and preparation, language, these sort of things that have kept our cultures going for centuries. So things that are handed from parent to child, these things have been heavily diluted and lost over just a few generations, after surviving for so long and really building safety nets into our culture. And so what I'm looking at is how do we revive the useful and healing aspects of these parts of our inheritance? And how do we incorporate them into our daily practice so that our modern lives can become better? And I also have a lot of fun thinking about more science fiction-y means of gathering knowledge from ancestors. And that talking crossing into other dimensions, wormholes, portals, cryptids, literal time travel kind of solutions. I often make fantastical ceremonial time travel gear for a time traveling alter ego and wormholes for her to enter. So growing up, I made a traditional regalia for ceremonies and for powwows. And I was, a child of the 80s and the 90s, so a lot of my work is aesthetically influenced by that. I was also a trained milliner when I was a teenager. I was trained in San Francisco to make hats for the John Coltrane Church for Easter. And I also grew up making Iroquois headdresses. So it's kind of a combination of these things in my work. Let's see if I can get this next slide. So these are some of this character that I'm developing as a Native American time traveling drag queen. It's all these kind of aesthetics that I grew up loving, a little punk rock, all kinds of these visual cues. So when considering a proposal for Owning Earth, I happened to be reading about American Indian end of time prophecies, specifically like the Hopi's 9 signs for the end of the world, which talks about the land being crossed by snakes of iron, giant spider webs crisscrossing the land, strange beasts like buffalo, but with great horns that will overrun the land in large numbers, the land being crisscrossed by rivers made of stones, the sea turning black and all things dying quickly as a result, and the dwelling place in the heavens above the earth falling with a great crash, which will signify the end of ceremonies. So I'm reading this, these prophecies, and I'm also watching Barbarella, kind of in the same chunk of time. If you don't know Barbarella, it's a sci-fi film, the late 70s, starring Jane Fonda. Fabulous movie. So these two things together got me thinking about how an indigenous person would time travel. Travel to the past, the future, and then back to the present to teach us about how to get our lives back on track in order to avoid these disasters that they're prophesizing, to save the world, to save our lives. And so I decided to design an indigenous time machine. And this is a terrible sketch, I apologize. I keep meaning to redo it. So at first I considered the dwelling form of my ancestors, which is a longhouse. But the longhouse is not very sexy. It's clunky. It wasn't really made for traveling. So, I looked at Hogan's, I looked at all these different kinds of adobe, and I ultimately landed on the cone shape of the teepee, because not only is it stereotypically and instantly recognizable as a Native American home, It's designed to be a movable structure, and it's much more aerodynamic than the heavy elm bark covered homes of the Iroquois tribe. So this work I'll be doing for Owning Earth is titled We Told You So. And it consists of a native plains teepee modified for time travel with its tip plunged into the ground. And I'm hoping to be a full-size teepee. We're still working out the how it's gonna structurally stand. But I want it to be so it's really plunged into the earth, that it's just landed from outer space, or from this time hole in the sky. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Here's some other pictures I've included of some more of my time traveler gear for this character that goes through these wormholes. This is some braiding. I grew up the women in my line are the cornhusk braiders, and I grew up making ceremonial cornhusk masks. So I still use a lot of these techniques in my work. So I'll just take you through. These are all cornhusk and fibers, steel, welded steel. These are some pieces I'm working on now that are in my studio I haven't had access to for a while. And these are tufted rug, using industrial tufters to create rugs in cornhusk and tufting cornhusk, tufting fibers, tufting felt, tufting horsetail, and these kinds of things. So my work combines traditional Iroquois craft building techniques and materials and contemporary and innovative techniques. I use contemporary machines and materials as well. My use of traditional craft is a way for me to kind of awaken my ancestral DNA to see what I can learn from it. Through muscle memory, through like activating my hands in the way that my ancestors' hands have been activating these materials for centuries, and mixing them with contemporary, and modern inventions. I'm trying to start a conversation between the past and the present, and how can we bring these things together, using our bodies and using these crafts as a way of starting that. And as I said earlier, these aesthetics, they're really heavily influenced by powwow regalia, drag culture, and pop culture. So I'm excited about the project. I'm excited to be involved in it. I think it's going to be just some really weird conversations going on. Some more traditional, but just some really out there solutions to, what it's going to look like, after this pandemic, So, okay, I think that's me.
Thank you, Erin. Woo!
Now how do I get out of here? Okay. All right, stop share.
There we go. Hey, great. Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
Yeah, the idea for the piece came after we had started already working together. We felt, you felt that we needed an indigenous monument somewhere.
Honestly, it came from the idea that I thought we needed some humor.
Right.
Like I thought that was the initial impulse, that I was like, we need so much of like the indigenous survivance is, I believe, like humor is kind of the base of a lot of that ability, is to find humor in difficult times. And so for me, it's really important to have humor when talking about serious subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, hey, this is native land. This actually isn't my land. I'm a little farther north, but I thought we'd represent.
Beautiful. Great. So our next speaker, thank you, Erin. Our next speaker is Sariah Park. Sariah Park is an interdisciplinary artist with over 15 years of experience in fiber, print, and fashion design. Sariah's current research is focused on the development of sustainable printing methods for textiles and fine art practices. Her most recent body of work features the upcycling and repurposing of dead stock and damaged printed textiles into new forms, and printing with waste to create large-scale works on paper. Sariah's work aims to challenge the status quo of making and asks important questions regarding societal and industrial waste, consumption, sourcing, and methods of manufacturing. I was really struck by her proposal for the show, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say about it today. So welcome, Sariah.
Thank you, Tal. I'm excited to share my work today. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So when thinking about the prompt for our panel today, impossible futures, here we are in a pandemic. And I'm kind of trying to imagine the future after now and even beyond. And it's, I don't know, I'm kind of seeing more of like a decayed utopian wasteland. So when coming up with like a topic for my work, wasteland felt very appropriately, where kind of all that remains of our human society is our waste. And I kind of came to that conclusion the other day, thinking about like all of my belongings and all of my work and what will live on after all of us. So for the last 15 years, I've been working as a textile designer, a textile artist. Fashion and textiles combined are the second most polluting industry after the oil industry. And I got into the industry very naive and as an artist wanting to make one-of-a-kind pieces. I was not interested in mass producing. And it kind of happened just not by accident, but the course of my work kind of took a different direction. I ended up selling my thesis collection to Barney's New York right out of undergrad, my BFA program from Parsons. And that kind of launched me into an industry that I really wasn't prepared for. But, and through that experience and seeing that waste creation firsthand was just so devastating. So I've heard the call to change for a while now, and I've experienced climate change pretty drastically myself. In 2011, my studio was flooded after Hurricane Irene, and far more recently, in 2 years ago, almost to the day, we had a tornado hit our house in Newburgh, New York. So I was displaced for over a year. A bunch of my textiles were damaged. And so looking at that waste creation firsthand, and it got me thinking of like how to move forward, how do I use this waste material? These are some of the textile development that I was doing commercially, and I started producing it. And it was through the act of producing these kind of one-of-a-kind textiles that I saw how the act of production was creating this waste. It's not just the post-consumer waste that's so devastating, it's the post-production waste. So textile designers design their fabric, they're made into commodities that are then sold and used and inevitably disposed of and put into landfills. So right after the production, there's so much leftover sample yardage, production yardage that can never be used again, and that it's deemed waste. And I felt that this was a unique problem that I could solve as a designer and as an artist, and use my skills to kind of unmake waste. So these are some of my prints. So I was thinking, can printmaking or can weaving be used as a tool to unmake waste? So the system of making that we currently have in the fashion and textile industry is a system where the creation of new materials is so devastating. So in order to make any kind of environmental impact, we need to not create any new material. Even organic materials, it's the harvesting, it's the water consumption, and the act of producing new textiles is creating so much waste. So I really wanted to address that post-production waste. So you'll see this new system of making here, like going from the traditional, where it just goes directly to the landfill. I want to take from the production stage and go in and take all of this sample yardage, production yardage, this leftover material that the industry deems as valueless, and give it new value through the act of reprinting or taking and dismantling clothing, taking back materials, and then through the act of weaving, turning it into new material. So these are kind of two systems that I want to further develop, but that relate to my unison proposal. And during this time, I also started this other body of work where I was printing with waste. So a lot of my archive was damaged from Hurricane Irene and through the tornado. So I had some material that was not even usable to reprint and turn into new garments or new products or new art. So I started cutting that material off as I was printing. And as I was cutting off the materials, they were kind of piling up, and I was listening to the materials and they were kind of telling me what to do. And I kind of started this Printing with Waste series. So these were more one-of-a-kind mono prints. It's me here in the studio working on this piece, and there are the pieces installed in the gallery. So I like to work large scale, but really drawing attention to the labor of textiles. I think we take them for granted. We wear them on our bodies. They're in our homes. They surround us every day, but we don't really look at the finite detail of how they're constructed and that value of that time and labor. Then after printing with the waste, I started embedding the waste into paper as another way to kind of keep the life cycle of the waste going. I was also taking my leftover sample yardage and production yardage and taking it apart, cutting it into strips, making sort of soft sculptures out of the waste material. And this leads me to kind of my proposal for Unison. I want to create weavings with the waste material, so post-consumer waste, as well as the production waste. This is kind of like a little mock-up of a proposed area, maybe in the Unison garden, where these tapestries would be suspended. They'd be made from the post-production waste and also dyed with food waste. So I'd be using things like avocado pits, onion skins, things that we have in our home that we're using when we're cooking, that all of us just throw away. They actually are very beautiful dye stuffs. These are some images from some workshops that I've done at Parsons with natural dyeing. So you see the vibrancy of the colors that you can get from the food waste. And that will be incorporated into the weavings themselves, where I'll be inserting the food waste, the onion skins and avocado pits into these kind of large pockets into the weavings, as well as filling them with wildflower seeds and harvested flower petals for natural dye, so that over the course of the 2-year installation, the piece will kind of decompose, degrade, kind of become one with nature, and kind of the dye is going to spill out, it's going to change. I think it's going to become more beautiful over the course of the 2 years as it kind of decomposes. So I'm excited to do the project. I can't wait to get started, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Sariah. Woo! That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sariah. Our last speaker today is Emilie Houssart, who explores the absurd symptoms of human disconnection from the environment through painting, printmaking, sculpture, and installation. Her work collides the organic with the mechanical, delicacy with violence, and naturally interdependent or chance systems with geometric constraints, and which poses questions about types of intelligence. She moved to the Hudson Valley in 2013, where she's currently an instructor at Fallkill Printworks and at the Woodstock School of Art, and she's a resident artist at the Barrett Art Center in Poughkeepsie, New York. Her recent shows include Earthbound, New York, which is co-curated by Hyun J. Lee, Forest Geometries, a solo show and performance at the Frans Meseriel Centrum in Belgium, and Damaged Goods, a solo installation of prints at the Norwich Millennium Library in the UK. Just for those of you who joined us after I made this original announcement, in the chat you should see the website links for each of our speakers today, if you're interested in learning more about any one of them. So without further ado, Emilie, take it away.
Well, hi. Thank you for the introduction. I was super excited to hear about the proposal for this show, which I think is just perfectly timed, groundbreaking, like has potential for all kinds of new and exciting possibilities. Its focus on the earth particularly spoke to me, something I've been thinking about a lot recently, particularly the very, very sophisticated ecology that exists right below our feet all the time that we never think about. So really that's what I've been focusing on the last few years, and I'd like to show a couple of projects that are related to that. If I need to speak up, you'll just tell me, right? Okay, great. All right, here we go. Screen share coming up imminently.
I love how this is a new thing for us, no? The Zoom thing, no? I mean, I hope I'll get better at it, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure I want to be a Zoom expert. I'm really hoping we get back together in person soon.
I just need to set the privacy here.
You got it? Okay.
Okay. So let's try that again. Oh, so Tal, a technical issue. It says it won't be able to record the contents of my screen until I've quit Zoom and come back. Would you like me to do that?
No.
Because I've changed the privacy settings. So my slides may not be available on the recording otherwise, I guess.
Okay. Do you want to just start talking, and how about you can email me your presentation? I can play it from my computer.
Thank you. Great.
Okay,
That'd be great.
Sure.
Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. That's wonderful. Okay, here we go. Slideshow. So Tal, you mentioned the Forest Geometries project at the Frans Mazereel Centrum. I did a residency there last October. And it's in a very rural part of Belgium, right next to this incredible lush forest. And the printmaking facilities are really great too. But I found that I just wanted to spend a long time in the forest, really thinking about this unbelievable cycle of decay and renewal, regeneration that was going on all around me, underneath me, above me, all around. You could smell it, you could see it everywhere. It was really a beautiful place to spend some time. And so, all art making can be extremely wasteful, and it's a very problematic thing. I wanted to make something that was completely disposable, that could be returned to the earth and would completely disappear. This is something that, anyone who's read Linda Weintraub's book, What's Next, is very aware of. This kind of new movement in art of eco-materialism, trying to make work that doesn't leave any imprint whatsoever, which is a huge inspiration for me. So what I ended up doing was harvesting a lot of mushrooms from the forest. I guess I spent a lot of time walking through the forest and felt so unwelcome. I felt like I had no right to be there, that the forest was just absolutely perfect by itself, and humans tend to come along and just sort of, destroy everything. So I really wanted to make something as a sort of tribute to that, as an apology to the earth, really. The mushrooms were in season. There were just millions of them everywhere. So with a helpful team of volunteers, I foraged for some mushrooms and simply ground them up into a paste and made paper out of them. The paper was formed into geometric shapes, which is, again, a big theme in my work, thinking about the types of intelligence that humans have, and how for such a long time that has really been seen as the greatest thing. It's just such a problematic thing. Tal, you opened with a sentence about how mastery over the planet is not yet complete. Well, God, I hope that it's never complete. I hope that we can come to an understanding with the planet where we realize that lack of control is such a positive, strong thing, that, we really don't have to try and get in the way of everything to organize things, that we generally make things less complex, and things might work temporarily, but long term, we really just don't understand how things work on this planet, and we really need to take a step back. So the earth is the best, really, place to look at this, because all life comes from the earth below our feet. So it was an amazing experience to be able to make these geometric shapes out of mushrooms, which is just so terribly wrong feeling to see them in a square and a rectangle. And as they dried, nature took over and they just ripped themselves apart. Some of them sort of, some of them really, the pine needles held them together. They're incredibly delicate. They're also highly toxic to humans, which seemed perfect. We were totally not welcome in this artwork. And some of the paper was cut up after it had dried instead into geometric shapes, so that it would make these absurd little squares, again, sort of representing the limits of conscious thought and rational thought. There's a beautiful new gallery at the Franz Miserel Centrum. So it was great to be able to display those pictures, or those pieces, they're really paper sculptures, I suppose, in the sunlight with the forest in the background through the windows there. They're just separated by the glass. It seemed kind of like a perfect metaphor for, for us removing things from nature. And shortly after that, it began to rain and the work was returned to the forest. And there was a ceremony in the forest of apology. I wrote down some things and I'm still getting ready to release into the world, but over several days, the work began to disintegrate back into the ground, where it's going to nourish the next generation of growth. Even the next day, there were new mushrooms sprouting up through the paper, and new pine needles had fallen. The work began to slowly disappear. It became harder to find it every time I went back. And it was a very moving experience. I think the beginning of something. You can see the lush forest here. This is where the paper squares were sprinkled on this amazing mossy stump. And I just had it was incredible to have such a connection with nature, which I think a lot of the work in this show is going to be about. Watching those leaves lie on the moss in these, they looked so incredibly like leaves and then so wrong and out of place. So it's really a meditation piece. The other piece I'd like to talk about that's connected to the show is a potato cube, which was also last fall. Again, of course, potatoes come from the earth, but this piece is closely related to this show in that it's also about industrial agriculture, thinking about the food that we eat, and how really we don't spend any time thinking about where that comes from and how it's been manipulated and how we are really ravaging the earth and not respecting what the earth needs back. And so this is, again, a reduction to the simplest form, which for me is a cube. Which represents human conscious thought of a really ordinary earthy thing that we generally don't pay much attention to. So I made this cube of potatoes, which is an impossible shape. And I wanted to place it in all kinds of different places to see how it changed and how it interacted with its surroundings. So here it is in a lovely organic farm. So these potatoes came from Stop and Shop. They were not organic. They did not come from a lovely CSA type farm like this. I had a conversation with the earth around it here. Here it is in Five Guys Burgers and Fries. There are some sacks of potatoes right behind it. We're eating fries. Nobody noticed it here, which is, again, one of the really interesting things about the different places it got put. It just seemed like a stack of potatoes ready to be eaten. No one noticed that it was really there, except for this one kid at the next table who just couldn't stop smiling. Here it is at Deer Beacon, where of course people just assumed it was a minimalist art piece and took a lot of selfies with it, because that's apparently how you interact with minimalist art pieces these days. And then it went to a few other places too. I'm trying to keep this short, but Stop and Shop was really where all the fireworks happened. I brought it back to Stop and Shop. And my son, you can never quite tell what a 5-year-old is going to do when you ask them to help you. But in this instance, it all went kind of amazingly. And he dragged it all the way through the supermarket with a cape on, which is really great. Here it is having a dialogue with the chips on the shelf next to it. Processed, packaged. I don't know how many times we eat these without thinking where they come from, without thinking what kind of relationship we have to agriculture and the earth. But this was kind of an amazing moment in this project. Again, nobody noticed that it was in an impossible shape. They definitely noticed the cube. We had a lot of conversations with the public about the potato cube. But nobody, when people talked about the cube, they generally were just surprised that I would let my son pull the potatoes to the checkout because they thought they might fall over. They didn't notice that it was impossible that this pile would be in a geometric formation, presumably because they were surrounded with swathes of produce in geometric formations, and we're so conditioned to think that that's normal that nobody noticed. So that was kind of incredible. And then a wonderful thing happened, and the surveillance robot at Stop and Shop came up and came across the potato cube and freaked out and couldn't understand with its sensors what was going on. It started, all the hazard warning lights went off, and it started saying, "Caution, hazard detected." And then loads of people started coming up to us and talking all about surveillance in supermarkets. And so it began this whole incredible public dialogue just through potatoes. So that was all very pleasing. So I guess that's the end of the slideshow. I'd like to talk a little bit about my project, my proposal for this show, Owning Earth. And on a very related theme, I would like to make in the forest some protrusions that are entirely made of the forest floor. Erin mentioned humor in the work. I think that's a really important element in my work. I think in terms of engagement, it's one of the best things that you can do to get people really interested and emotionally involved and excited and start a dialogue, which is really what a lot of work is all about. So what I'd like to do is, when you enter the forest, for you to see these protrusions coming up from the ground. That is really the earth. It's going to be unclear whether it's rising up or decaying down. The tops will be completely geometric, just a square. And apart from that, it will be a sort of rising, just lump of forest floor matter, which is this incredibly sophisticated ecology that we never think about. With it, you'll be confronted with at body level. So that for me is something very exciting. It has all kinds of connotations. I mean, for one thing, those kind of rigid geometries are things that we recognize from our, rectilinear boxes that we live in, our borders, our farmlands. There are a lot of connotations there that were interesting to me. And also, of course, pedestals in art galleries. I mean, if you think of your average white cube art gallery, you can expect to see a sculpture on a white pedestal. I wanted the earth to become the subject. So really the material is a subject here. And it's absurd. I want it to be, surprising and absurd, and then hopefully to stimulate some deeper thought about our relationship with the earth. I've recently been spending some bit of time thinking about Rem Koolhaas's show at the Guggenheim at the moment, Countryside, the Future, which is a whole giant, basically collage wall of research on technology about the countryside. And it was so striking to have a look at that show, unfortunately only online, and really miss the art terribly. There's no art in this show. It's just a massive amount of information. A lot of it really, really fascinating. But there is very little about respect for nature. It was mostly about technologies for controlling nature. But there was surprisingly little even about technologies for removing carbon or for building with mushrooms or all these exciting new things that are coming up. It was really a very human-centric vision of the future, and I just don't think that is the vision of the future that we need. So really, that's the kind of stuff I'm stewing on when I'm making these works. I'm super excited to be in this show, and that's it.
Hey, thank you. One of the funny things about Zoom is that you don't ever get to hear the clap. So thank you, Emilie.
Oh, there was a clap? Thanks.
There was a clap, yeah, that was, I clapped.
Yay.
So I want to thank our speakers, Christy, Sariah, Emilie, and Erin. And now at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. If you have any, please feel free to raise your hand. And then when I call on you, I guess, I'll unmute you, and that'll be how that goes. So let me know if you need any more instruction. There's a participant button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When you click on that, you should see an option for raise hand. You can ask any of the artists any question you want. That's obviously relevant to the show or to their work. So I guess I can start with one question of my own. I'm wondering if, oh, well, actually we have Maureen Connor, and I'll unmute her now. Maureen, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt your first question.
No,
You could go ahead.
it's great because I already spoke, and we don't have too much longer, so I'm hoping to get some
Okay.
more questions.
Okay. All right. This is a question for Erin. First of all, thank all of you for your great presentations. I really enjoyed them all so much. And I understand the time limits and everything else. I think everybody just did a great job. So thank you. And I really look forward to meeting you and hearing more about your work. So Erin, this may be kind of a really off the wall question, but is there any component that could be connected to time travel in Native American culture?
Any component? Is there a precedent for it? Is there?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. My grandfather actually was he was a soothsayer and a healer. He was Chief Shigoi Christian. He would astrally project as a young boy.
Really?
And where it was so commonplace in his culture that his older brother and his fathers would go to town for like months at a time to travel and trade in town, and his mother would have him sit with a blanket over his head, and every now and then he'd sit with a blanket over his head, and he would tell her when they got to a certain point on their road so she could start dinner. It was that just like picking up a telephone. It was like, can you go tell me where your brother and father are, so dinner would be ready when they arrived. But there's all kinds of talk of these kind of interdimensional beings in a lot of different Native cultures. Like the Kachina dolls, you see these Kachinas. Kachinas
Right.
are these spirits that are interdimensional beings. So there are a lot of different thoughts on that in different Native American tribes. And that kind of got me started as a young child, because I was kind of raised in this Bigfoot and, time travel. My grandfather was a medicine man, so I participated in a lot of these ceremonies, these really secretive ceremonies growing up, with false face masks and all this kind of, spirits possessing bodies for healing. So yeah, it was, and then I also love sci-fi. So there is a definite base for that in my culture, for sure.
Okay. Great to know. I had no idea. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for asking.
Any other questions? All right, we got Matthew Friday coming right up.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. First of all, just like a huge, tremendous thank you and virtual hug to everyone. This was so awesome to hear these presentations and to get a little window into this work here. And I'm just super excited that Unison's going to be able to host this, and that my community here in New Paltz and at SUNY New Paltz, of which 3 of the speakers are students currently at, that we're going to be able to participate in this work in the future. It's just an awesome opportunity. And Tal, thank you again for generously assembling all of this, and your skill in bringing everyone together. It's really wonderful. So question for you. I have a question about aesthetics. As we've seen, aesthetics has been sort of aestheticized in all sorts of ways that tend to reinforce the logics of capitalist domination, right? From the sort of scopophilic mastery of the God's eye view of the Hudson River painters, where you get to see everything and lay it out as a sort of map for conquest, right? To the more pleasant still lives that grace so many domestic interiors. And it seems like y'all have embraced a radically different form of aesthetics that strategically eliminates forms of distancing, right? And dissolves or blurs some of the boundaries between inside and outside, or subject and object. And I was just wondering if you had, if you could speak to this, or if you had thoughts of how you're deploying aesthetics in this really novel and interesting way.
Christy, this might be an excellent
Yeah,
question for you
yeah.
to start off with. Yeah.
I would say that for this particular work of mine in this show, it's an aesthetics of sensuality and of experience. And the sculpture itself will be made when I'm in the tree, kind of like experiencing it for the first time. We'll be experiencing each other for the first time. And so in a similar way to how with the Ardor workshops, it's about seeking and sort of communicating about consent and desire and nearness. There will be that sort of ethic behind the aesthetics of the sculpture that's eventually created. It's physically challenging to install a work like that in a space like that. And so you're thinking with the body, maybe with the heart, like it's a form of embrace, the sculpture. So, yeah, I feel like it's a feminist approach. It's a queering approach. It's one of many.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Matthew, for that excellent question. Matthew, by the way, is one of the is also an artist in the show, but also is one of the sculpture committee members. So he plays many roles and has many hats. So thank you, Matthew. Sariah, Erin, Emilie, do you want to speak to that as well?
I guess the aesthetics of my proposal are actually completely crucial to the work, and that's an interesting way to think about it. In the way that I was totally unsatisfied by looking at this design show, where the viewer is completely passive, a recipient. There's no way for you to go except for just absorbing masses of information. It's very hard to know what your role is as the receiver with all this highly technological work. I'm really trying to prompt the opposite of that with these works, which I'm trying to make as simple as possible. The viewer emotional response is like hugely, that is kind of the work. And so I guess the aesthetics are totally key in producing that. It's not the work itself as a sort of intellectual feat, but it's that feeling of wrongness that people will encounter when they come across it. And hopefully, drawing on ideas of absurdist theater, remembering that feeling. If you find something funny, you're not able to deal with the tragic element of it until much later, and it's much more likely to stick with you. So that's something that I really hope people will take home with them. And actually, hopefully, if you see a great piece of work, it actually changes you. And I'm hoping, that's ambitious, but I hope that that's really my goal, is to have that aesthetic reaction, create a conflict and something that will stimulate an eventual change.
Wonderful. Do we have another question? We are running a little bit late. It's 5:09 right now. We were hoping to end at 5, but is there another question? If not, I have a quick one. It might not be quick, but it is inspired by the show at the Guggenheim Museum. And I'm struck by depictions of land in interior spaces, and how interiority and the outside world how our understandings of these spaces has shifted as a result of the pandemic. They're now infused with feelings of privilege that I didn't quite understand before, and it does make me feel somehow that this opportunity to work outside in a sculpture garden, and to install a show there for people who can actually come out and visit it, that's a real, it's a wonderful opportunity to have now. And I'm wondering how and whether the artists on this panel have considered what it means that their work is an outdoor experience. Has it, if you were to depict this, is your work possible inside? Would it change the meaning of the work? It's an open question. I haven't given it, I haven't formulated it very clearly, but there is something about this exterior landscape that I think is very interesting right now. And I just want to open it up to see if you have any thoughts.
Well, no.
Oh, I just wanted to say that this is the inside version of my work. So the limb is off of the tree, cut down by beavers, and the scale is much different. And so I think it's a question of life and death, and it's a question of scale, in a sort of very broad stroke answer to your question.
Well, I think that moving the pieces in, having them outside gives so much more of a real experience, and a tangible experience. And if the pieces were inside, then we start approaching the fact that we're separate from nature, instead of being part of it. So for me, the idea that we can do this outside, especially right now when we're all inside, I think we can appreciate that connection even more, having fresh air, sunlight, all the things that make us human, part of.
Erin, we have some audio trouble with you.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
That's all right. Sunshine. Say hi. Children, yeah.
Hello. Anyone else? Sariah, Emilie, if you want.
I'm really excited that the piece is going to be outside. This is something new for me. I've done mostly works on paper. It's very precious. It goes into a gallery, or my textile work gets turned into high-end garments. So for me to feel that connection to the earth, to do something that's going to be outside for people to see, and touch and experience, and to watch it change over time from the environment and kind of get battered and start the decay process and really become something else by the end of the exhibition is really exciting. And it wouldn't otherwise happen unless it was outside. So that's very critical to the piece.
Yeah. I mean, our insides are constructed environments in which pretty much all of us live are our primary physical separations from the earth. And so it's crucial to my work that it's outside, that you're I'm lucky enough to be in the sort of forest area of Unison for my project, which is, forests are what we associate with the least unspoiled, whether that's true or not, areas of the earth. And so it's really exciting to work with something that, will get people into that space. Also, just because, let's go back to the title of the show here. Owning Earth is just a very strange concept. Whether that's even something that's really possible or meaningful in any way is definitely up for question here. And I think I'm super excited to engage with all the other artists in that show about that topic specifically. So the idea that public artwork that's made of earth, that's outside in a sculpture park, and one that's free, so much the better, is really super exciting, because it could become something that is really for everything and everybody. It's also for the squirrels.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. And again, I want to say a big thank you to Christy Gast, Sariah Park, Emilie Houssart, and Erin Antonak. As I mentioned before, their websites are in the chat. Also, as I think should be clear to everybody who joined us today, and thank you so much for joining us. This show is all about supporting the development of a just and regenerative bioregion in the Hudson Valley, and for supporting an emerging movement of creative practitioners who are thinking about new ways of approaching material and questioning human dominance and notions of human sovereignty. So if these issues are important to you, again, in the chat, I've also shared a donation link. And please do make a contribution to support Unison. Obviously, arts institutions are super important to the recovery effort after and during COVID. And really appreciate any support. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody joining us. And I'm going to unmute everybody for just a moment. We can all say thank you, I guess. And I'm seeing now everybody's faces. This is lovely. Lovely to see everybody in grid view. If you haven't done that yet, it's really great. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Good to see everyone.
Thank you all.
Doing it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Tom.
Bye.
Dr. Schuster is requesting.
Okay.
Okay,
one sec, I'm leaving this.
Requesting Schloss.
Okay, putting it.
Is he still?
Let's go to the creek, okay?
It's really nice to hear. It's just an opening of space, right?
Before.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again. I'm ending the meeting. Have a great day. Have a beautiful Sunday. Enjoy.
You want to throw a ball in the creek?
Bye-bye.